Okay, first off, we are going to talk about means and standard deviations. We're going to talk a little bit about range. We're going to talk about box and whisker plots. We're going to do histograms. And we're going to do this all with my StarCraft. So I'm going to keep going on this theme where we're talking about APM, actions per minute. And so I'm going to talk about all of these things by analyzing the APMs of Platinum Leagues here with Grandmaster Leagues here. And so just looking at the numbers, you could probably see that those numbers are quite higher when you're a Grandmaster, on average. But you notice there are some Platinum people like Gomo here who have a really high APM. So we are going to just do some description here. This is not a hypothesis test, but our hypothesis here is that Grandmaster stats have higher APMs on average than Platinum players. And so we're not going to set up our hypothesis for this stuff. We're just going to find means and standard deviations. So what I did here was I got the tool GeoGebra. This is what you're going to be using so you don't have to do much math. We're going to let the computer do the statistical calculations for us. So you have to go to geogebra.org, not .com, geogebra.org, and then you're going to be typing your data in here. Now for my examples, I only have a few data points here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're doing this, you want to get up to 30 if you can when you do your analysis in your game, so you know your stats are valid. So what I did here was I went through the Platinum stats, and there are some APMs that are 0, which is a fluke. They shouldn't have APMs of 0. They're playing the game. So what I did was I just skipped the 0 because those are anomalies. And I typed in the Platinum APMs and the Grandmaster APMs. So one thing you can do is, if you just want to look at the Platinum APMs, if you click on this little corner and click one variable analysis, and you hit analyze, it's going to do it for you. Now, originally you're going to see something like this. They'll make a histogram for you. And to make the data look a little more appealing, you can kind of change up the bars so that it's a finer resolution. So if you wanted to use the histogram to kind of compare two different sets of data like I'm doing, you could do that here. But the main reason I'm going here first is because it says show statistics in this little button here. You click there. Here's the number of data points. Here is the average. The average Platinum player has a mean of 121.5. So we know what averages are. Now let's compare that with our Grandmaster stats. 158. So it is a little higher. The other thing that we're going to be talking about is this S here. Now these numbers here are pretty close. Those are both standard deviations, but you're going to be using the little s here because that's the standard deviation of this population. Standard deviation means how far apart is your data spread out. And so the larger your standard deviation here, the more your data is spread out. So if you think about it, if you're in Grandmaster League, probably people are going to have higher APMs, but also there's probably not going to be as much variance in your APMs. Like Grandmasters are probably all going to be very high APMs, and they're all going to be pretty close together because there's kind of a limit to how fast you can be as a human. So 36.5 is your standard deviation here. And based off what I'm saying, if I look at Platinum League, it's probably going to be more variance because these players are not as skilled. Yep, you look at the standard deviation, it's like 20 higher, which means that the data is way more spread out. Also, if you just look at the data here, you can kind of see that it's following this kind of curve, which means there are more down at the lower end. It's called skewing to the right here. If you go to the Grandmaster League, you can do, you can see a kind of bell curves here, and this actually might be kind of an odd duck. There's one guy that's between 80 and 100. So most of our data is way up here. Alright, so that's average, and that's standard deviation, and I just did an example of how you might compare your own stuff. The next thing we have to talk about is range. Okay, so the range, if you look at the min and the max here, the minimum and the max, if you subtract those, you're going to get your range. So let me pull up a calculator here. If I do 213 minus, I have a range of 134 here. So between the highest and the lowest for Grandmaster, it's 134. Now let's see what the range is for Plat. Alright, 213 minus 76, about 137. 67 rather. Okay, so the range for the Platinum is slightly higher, slightly larger. But guys, you might have noticed that the data on the Platinum is way more spread out, even though the ranges are about the same. And so that's why we look at standard deviation here. Okay, so let's go back to just what we're going to do is just look at this data, and we're going to do one variable analysis, except now we're going to take this box and we're going to go to box plot. So what this does is it creates a visual representation of where my data is spread out to. This is the inner 50%, 25% here, 25% here, and the top 25 and the low 25. And this right here is our median. So 50% of Platinum players are about 100 something and lower, about 107.5 and lower. 50% are between 107.5 and 213. Doing this as your first step when you're analyzing helps a lot. Let's take a look at the other guy here, the Grandmaster box plot. Okay, so this little x here means it's an outlier. I said that guy over there was probably a fluke. There's a mathematical way to tell whether that is an outlier, and it is. Most of our data is going to be way up here. You'll notice that if you look here, the bottom 50% is squished between 149 and 155. So the low 50% are going to be squished in between there. This is showing a lot more consistency than the Platinum players. So you could say that actually the actions per minute has a lot of a strong relationship with being in a higher league. So I wanted to show you another way to actually do both at the same time. If you highlight the data, click the arrow and go multiple variable analysis, it will be able to stack up your box plots together. So this is a good way to directly compare, and you can see that Grandmaster here, the B column, that's why these are B. Grandmasters are much higher, just visually. Like the 100% of them fit in close to the top, in the top 50%, but even almost in the top 25%. Okay, so if you're going to be comparing two populations, especially like averages like this, then you might want to just do this to get a sense for what the data looks like. Alright, and so if you wanted to do histograms, unfortunately in this program, I think you have to do them separately. You just do your analysis and then you do histogram right there. Just be careful about how you do your boxes. If I do boxes like this, it's not very clear. But if I break up my boxes so that there's more classes, like 8 classes, the only thing I'll say is that if you do 8 here and you are comparing it to the Grandmaster, make sure that you have 8 boxes here as well, so you're comparing the same data. One last thing before I stop this video, if you actually click this button right here, you can copy or export as a PNG. So in your PowerPoints, in your presentations, when you summarize your data, you can actually just drag and drop or save these and put them in your presentations.